All right, Perry, welcome to episode 17 of the Austin Real Estate Today Radio and Austin Realty Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for asking on this very special Veterans Day episode.
It's interesting. We're the day before the presidential election. We've been talking about that off and on for the last few weeks. And I don't know about you, but I'm ready to get this deal done, get the voting done, and then hopefully they won't have too big a repeat of what happened in the year 2000.
There'll probably be a whole lot of counting going on for a little while.
Well, it will be. I think that there's a big debate going on whether they're going to know in places like Ohio on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning what's going on, but we shall see. I mean, it certainly got the world captivated. If you look at news from around the world, that's a big part of what is going on. And what I find interesting, and I don't make a whole lot of partisan comments, but I do read a lot of Google News because I don't really watch the broadcast news on television that often. And one of the candidates, and not the incumbent, has been the leading headline. In other words, they rank sort of trending news for 4 days in a row. And the other one doesn't appear in the top 10 trending topics. Kind of like on social media like Twitter, they talk about trending topics.
Oh, yeah, I've got some buddies that posted maybe like 5 or 6 different clips about that particular candidate today, too.
Yeah, and so I find it interesting that the topic for the non-incumbent is the one that's trending. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it is interesting. I've noticed that for the last 5 days. And I think that we just need to get back to work and get America back on track. Certainly getting things back into Austin now. We haven't slowed down a lot. We're going to talk a little bit about inventory and some other challenges like we always do. But the economy here seems to be trudging along at a very quick pace, isn't it?
Yeah, inventory continues to shrink.
Yeah, and it becomes a challenge. Let's get into the news. Here's part one of the news. We're going to break it into 3 parts today because there's a lot going on with real estate-related news. It just happened to be in the last week we've had a ton of news and some interesting things going on. First story I want to get into with you, Perry, and talk about, because I think this is an important topic, is Austin's plan, and this has been a long time in the works, to get into a redevelopment of their code that has to do with planning from a real estate and housing standpoint. And they haven't done this for decades, have they?
Not yet.
Well,
when was the last time, in the 80s?
Yeah, 1984 was the last time they addressed this. And if you think about what Austin looks like now compared to what it looked like back in the early 80s, you wouldn't even recognize the area. And so the city councils began a 2-year process. This is going to be a big, long process with commentary from the public, hearings, a lot of discussions. They're looking to lay out and solicit input so they can come out in 2015 with a new code that is supposed to stay in place for the next couple of decades. So this has big implications for development around the Austin area.
What do you think will be the big change thing to push? Any guesses on what top 2 or 3 code items will change? Think they'll go solar? Think they'll add water retention, anything like that?
Absolutely. One will be near and dear to you, and that is the fact that downtown is heading a completely different direction than what they envisioned back in the 80s. In the 80s, downtown was government, and they had a lot of government entities and courthouse and things like that. There were not the residential towers and focus on residential and lifestyle living. They're going to have to address what they expect downtown to look like, because you're talking about high density, you're talking about transportation issues. They've worked on, various public transit corridors, and I think you'll see some focus on that. And then I believe that what you'll see is what Austin's plans are around development density as they've run out of close-in corridor development. I mean, if you look at a lot of the development in southwest Austin, we talk about Circle C in those areas, and they're still doing some development there, but I think they're going to put a stake in the ground as to what direction they want to focus growth on. And then you've got neighboring communities like Round Rock and Cedar Park, Leander, and those corridors where they're going to focus on what they want. But from an Austin standpoint, they're going to have to talk a little bit about land use to address what's going to happen for the next couple of decades.
Well, I'm interested to see if they're going to put any rail in that development too, and what kind of emphasis they're going to have on the community village, things like the Domain, places like Triangle, new development over there off of Bull Creek in 2222. How do you link all those things together and start developing?
Absolutely. And I think the thing you're going to see is a focus on density around downtown, density around places like the Triangle and other areas. And they're going to look to balance density because from an infrastructure standpoint, the biggest challenge in the Austin metro area is the road infrastructure was never envisioned in the core area to handle this kind of population. And so increasing density along certain corridors is going to be critical in order to have things work without just completely taxing the road infrastructure. We can't take and just solve it with more cars and more buses. I mean, the roads won't handle the capacity of the population we should expect in the area. And that's a big part of looking at forecasts for population. In 1984, when they did this original there were no forecasts that predicted what we're going to end up with around 2030, 2040 in Austin. Nobody even, if you look at where they thought we would be then and where we were likely to head based on current trends, it wasn't even close. Their focus and their accuracy would have been at least off by an order of magnitude of 10 to 20 times. I think that if you look at the forecast, and we talked about this a few podcasts ago, about the economic forecast for population growth, 2030, 2040, that was not even on the radar back in 1984, was it?
No, not at all. No, in fact, who would want to stay in Austin back then? You didn't know jobs.
There you go. There you go. Now everybody wants to be here. So let's get into article number 2. The National Association of Realtors released a number, and it's interesting because we've talked about demographics for Austin. And the numbers for September, 32% of residential buyers in September were first-time buyers. And that's down from 50% in 2009. So there's a couple of things happening here, and I'll tie this down to the presidential election and a number of other trends going on. We're at a fork in the road for Dodd-Frank and some of the things we'll be talking about when we get some guests on to talk about how difficult it is for lenders today, where things are either going to get easier or harder for buyers. And first-time buyers are in difficult challenges, and a couple of these bullets address some of the reasons. And we've talked about this several different ways, but demographically, we have huge pent-up demand for first-time buyers in Austin. A lot of them are renting, some are couch surfing, some are saving up money because they know they need significantly higher down payments in order to purchase. But in other markets in the country that are overrun with investors, Arizona would be an example of this. Florida is another one. California and parts of California are this way. All cash buyers are pushing out opportunities for buyers. And a lot of what's going on with housing that's distressed is in markets like Arizona, they'll buy it all cash, fix it up now, and put it back into the market as a rental unit. So this has two trends that you see nationally that are cited in this article, that some people are having to wait to purchase. There's less for them to pick from if they're competing with all cash investors. But the really bigger, more concerning thing is that this could get worse before it gets better. A lot of Dodd-Frank items, as far as difficulty for buyers, have not even been implemented. And I think that depending on what happens tomorrow, it could get worse over the next 4 years versus having something more balanced come into place. So from a real estate standpoint, you and I are going to probably be talking about this quite a bit because of the demographics in Austin. We've got a lot of buyers that are renting now that would love to purchase.
Oh, yeah.
That just can't.
Yeah, I agree. These guys, there's a huge pent-up demand, but I also wonder if they even really want to buy a house. I mean, it's not cool anymore for some groups to buy houses. I can remember as early as 2008 that everybody wanted to get in on the gotta own the house. I don't know if we had that same momentum before. So I completely agree that the demand is there. don't know if I got the vibe of buying houses yet. No one's really screaming, get me an affordable loan, get me a reasonable payment. I don't hear that yet.
Right. And you know what, I think we will see the demographics, if you go back to what we talked about at the top of this first segment with the development, we're going to see that movement out of the large suburban houses into what these first-time younger buyers want to buy, and it's going to have implications. And I know you're a big proponent of paying attention to this because the large homes, and we're going to talk about a part of our submarket in our Austin Realty Update today that has a lot of these larger, higher-priced homes. And people are moving and selling those and moving downtown. What I find interesting is those markets, and the one in particular we're going to talk about today is Lakeway, is still running really strong. Now, a decade from now, it could be very, very different, couldn't it?
Uh-huh.
So
Never really know what will happen.